All right, it's Twilight here, and I'm here to talk with you today about why it is almost impossible to heal a narcissist. So first I want to say I know you guys have heard many things on the internet. I'm going to take a slightly metaphysical approach. However, a lot of the information that I've pulled has come from therapists, people in the field who have been studying people with MPD for a long time, or people who have cluster B personalities for a long time. And one of the things that we understand about these particular personalities is that they're a parasitic personality. They're the type of personality that fear abandonment and rejection so much that they've almost created a collection of behavior tendencies in order to avoid that feeling. So you may think that you're the one that's triggering that in them. No, they're trying to run away from a feeling that they may have felt during childhood, a feeling that they may have felt at a specific point in their lives that really caused them to go into straight shock. So anything that triggers those feelings, they're trying to run from. You got to keep that in mind. So keep in mind that they're trying to run from feeling triggered, okay? Trying to run from feeling triggered. That's the premise of it. So, as an empath, it is nearly impossible to heal a narcissist for two reasons. When you think you're talking to one person, you're actually talking to two. I'm going to say that again. When you think you're talking to one person, you are actually talking to two. If you were to put on your spiritual eyes and see from your third eye, you would notice that you are not only talking to a wounded inner child, but you are also talking to a false self. So, and this wounded inner child and this false self have a parasitic relationship that's going on within the narcissist. So remember I said that they are running from a feeling. Well, many experts have found and theorized that during a certain part of their life as a child, they experience what you call PTSD. And they are dealing with some level of extremely deep shame. And this had to have happened either through parental neglect, parental abuse, some sort of sexual abuse, potentially being too spoiled, and potentially just not developing emotionally. So they went into shock. And this wounded inner child, you have a wounded inner child. They have an inner child that's on life support, okay? And when I was in a vision, when I went to the astral to speak to the narcissist that I knew, when I came up to him, I thought that this false self was taking him over, and perhaps he could be saved from this false self. But I was reassured in that vision that the false self was actually working cooperatively with this wounded inner child. Okay? Physical sense, when I would talk to him, he would always say things to announce his superiority. Even if it was like totally random, he would announce his superiority, something to the extent of, you will do what I say, or I am in control and you will allow me to be the one that you will lean on and listen to. Not in those exact words, because I don't want to out him, because it's just not worth it. But in that energy is what was being appropriated. And when that happened, that was the cue to the false self, I'm being activated. And the false self is a lie. When you see somebody permeating energy from within and you see that they are empowered, there's nothing more that they need to do to make you want to listen to them. When you see somebody projecting a false imaginary self, a mirage, a holograph out into the world, when you see someone projecting that false self has to vindicate its lies. So the way the false self does that is through degrading. Okay, so when you're in a relationship with a narcissist, you'll notice that they have to continue to degrade you. So with the narc that I was with, he would activate his false self through some just random tyrannical title that he would give himself, and then that's when the degradation started. That is when he would begin to disintegrate or pick apart my self-esteem, or potentially find some sort of thing that he knew that I was potentially insecure about and exploit it, because the false self needs to feed off of people kind of being beneath him, being beneath it. Now remember, this is the narcissist doesn't have a true personality. So this is one indication of the false self being activated and needing to degrade people. You will notice that they don't have friends. So in many instances, you'll hear that they have flying monkeys, people who just are their cronies. But mostly it's like they only want to be around people who are like their entourage, people who are going to promote them, or people who are going to bow down to them, or people that don't make them feel threatened. Their family members, they hate family members who tell them the truth about who they are. Okay? They will literally kill those family members. What they want is they want enablers, people who facilitate the narrative that they want. So whether they have to get that through manipulating people or brute force and aggression, it matters not. They must facilitate this false self. So as I said before, in my vision, I saw that the false self and the wounded or nearly annihilated inner child was working in a parasitic partnership with one another. So the reason why you can't heal them is because there's always two people that you are talking to. And if you trigger any feelings within them that makes them feel insecure, inadequate, inferior, or anything that reminds them of that very traumatic time that originally caused them so much pain that they had to create a false persona in the first place, they are going to ensure that they run away from that feeling. And how do they run away from that feeling? They empower their false self. And how does their false self handle things? Terribly. And even if a narcissist were to say into therapy, if the therapist started to get too close to knowing what they're really all about, this could potentially trigger the narcissist's feelings of inferiority, because even they feel superior to therapists. They didn't have to go to fucking school. They know more than the therapist because they can manipulate them. So that's what gives them a sense of superiority and empowerment. So if the therapist becomes too deep into what they are really truly hiding from the world, they'll find a way to kind of spin things to manipulate their own therapist. I mean, it actually happened with the narcissist that I was dealing with. And they make sure that the therapist gives them diagnosis that they want. Their moods, but their moods aren't really based on the fact that they are unable to control their emotions. It is based on the fact that they are suffering from some form of post-traumatic stress disorder, and this false self is there to help them, or they think that it's there to help them. And it turns out to be a lower frequency entity that is parasitic like an octopus, and it links into you and you link into it, and they become one. So it is nearly impossible for those with an empathic heart who sees that wounded inner child and they want to love that wounded inner child back to wholeness. Because as soon as you trigger the feeling of any type of threat, they are going to be in attack mode. And I am talking about even with the love. You would think a person would not feel attacked by love. Oh, but a narcissist does. Because it brings them to a point of vulnerability. And remember, they're running from that feeling. So I have to emphasize to you, they're running from the feeling of vulnerability, even if it's triggered by a feeling of love, because love can be fragile, it can be delicate, but they can also lose in love too. You see? So even when they break up with you and you see them with other people, that they're now, that and they've probably already had these people lined up because of this constant fear of annihilation and this constant fear of being exposed for what they really are. So to live as a tortured soul, as these narcissists are, they are really truly in a whole lot of torment. And it's weird because you would think, like I said, love would heal that, but it doesn't, because it makes them feel vulnerable, and vulnerability reminds them of whatever pain they're running away from. So you can't go that direction. You can't put them in front of a therapist, because when they get in front of a therapist, if the therapist doesn't recognize and know how to work with people with PTSD and false mirages and false personas, if that therapist is not trained there, they're going to manipulate that therapist, because if the therapist gets too close, they're going to have to redirect that energy, and they're not about making it appear like they are inferior to anyone. So they're not going to put themselves in a position to be, when you're talking to them about how they hurt you, and oh, you did this to me, you did that to me, it feeds them. It's like, I always knew you were beneath me anyway, and this proves it. Look, I got you so emotional, I got you so messed up. It's like a demented, angry, fucked up child that has never grown. They could be 45 years old. The child inside them is still stuck in a loop of this wounded self. And and not only that, it is only strengthened through this poisonous relationship that it has with a false persona. So you're telling them how they hurt you, and they're going, I feel powerful. Wow, I feel powerful. The only thing that actually dissipates their power is ignoring them. And for a while, they may be a weak and drained because you were their spiritual food, but they will just find new spiritual food and new spiritual food and new spiritual food. They move like viruses, locusts. They go in one place and everybody starts to hate them, and then they go to another place, and then everybody starts to hate them there, and then they go to another place. And so they just keep moving about like locusts. And honestly, because of the false self, they will never, ever, ever allow themselves to get any really true introspect and reflection, because they cannot risk feeling this feeling of potential annihilation or vulnerability or attack or threat. So all your efforts to heal and appeal to their sensibilities, you can't, because you're talking to two entities, and neither one of them have the emotional maturity to fully understand you. You're talking to one entity where it's an angry, demented child. Like, imagine trying to tell Chucky, you really shouldn't be killing people. That's really not good. So you got one paradigm, on one end of the spectrum, you're talking to a demented, angry child. Then on the other end of the spectrum, you're talking to a hologram. So part of the reason why it is nearly impossible to do anything to help the narcissist to heal is because they are running from that feeling. There are two entities that are just not qualified to understand higher level emotional language. And so everything you say will be twisted for their own twisted thought processes. Your love will be seen as your admission that you are inferior to them. Okay? Your compliance will be seen as, you being a weak person. So honestly, everything is filtered through their twisted perception, There's absolutely nothing you can do unless you are a truly trained professional.